Thank you for listening to Soho Bites, the only podcast in the world, as far as we're aware, dedicated to talking about films set in Soho, the beating heart of bohemian cosmopolitan London. If you would like to support the show, you can do this in the form of a star rating or review at sohobitespodcast.com/review, or if you'd like to put a small amount of money where your mouth is, you can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Donations can be from as little as £3, which will buy, at London prices, about half a drink for one of our thirsty guests. You may hear some different URLs in the upcoming episode, but by far the easiest way is to follow one of those links. They are, again, sohobitespodcast.com/review and sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Thank you for your continued support and enjoy the episode.
Hello? Hey? Yeah? Speaking? Who? Not up yet.
Hello and welcome to episode 49 of Soho Bites. Soho Bites is the podcast in which we talk about Soho and the films that are set there. My name is Dominic Delargy, and firstly, thank you to everybody who sent me recommendations for seafood restaurants in Soho. As you probably know, there used to be a very famous fish restaurant on Old Compton Street called Wheeler's. It was the well-known haunt of Francis Bacon, Lucian Freud, Geoffrey Bernard. I think Tom Baker was a regular. It shut down many years ago, and I'd never actually been there, but I read about it, and it's still famous to this day. And many of you recommended the seafood bar on Dean Street. And funnily enough, it's only a couple of doors down from where I do some of my recordings for Soho Bites. And I was passing by there the other day and had a quick look in. There were some very loud roadworks in the street outside, and a pneumatic drill was breaking up the road surface, so I could hardly hear myself think. But I did hear the oysters. The oysters in the window were grumbling and complaining about the roadworks because, as everybody knows, any noise annoys an oyster, but a noisy noise annoys an oyster more. Hey now, come on, that's got to be worth a visit to sohobitespodcast.com/donate, where from as little as £3 you can help support the show. And thank you sincerely this time for all your kind comments about the return of Soho Bites after the long absence. It's very nice to know that people notice when we've gone. Publicising the show is a bit trickier now than it was back in the day because, and I'm no marketing expert, but there used to be this thing called Twitter, which was very good at spreading the word. For reasons of fascism, I'm no longer on Twitter, so I'm currently trying to build up the network again on Blue Sky. I feel like it's almost getting to the stage that Twitter was at before Dr. Evil took it over. So if you're not on Blue Sky, please consider joining, and once you have, look for Soho Bites. It would be lovely to see you there. Our film for this month, which we'll be talking about in the second half of the show, is the 1948 Soho noir Noose, or The Silk Noose as it was known over the pond. Set in the world of Soho clubs, spivs and racketeers in dowdy, war-ravaged London, it's a stylish thriller with a comedic edge and features a brilliant performance from Nigel Patrick as motor-mouthed Spiv Bar Gorman. Despite stealing the show, Nigel Patrick does not get top billing in this film though. That goes to Hollywood superstar Carol Landis, and it was one of the two films she made in the UK over the period of a few months in 1947 and 1948. She turned 29 on New Year's Day 1948, wrapped up filming on Noose in February of that year, and by July 1948, 2 months before the release of the film, Carol Landis was dead. To find out more about this, I went to the movies and dug up a tired old queen, and I'll be talking to him about Carol Landis in the first half of the show after this clunky musical transition.
Pin-up girl, that's what they name me. I'm the kid who loves you all. Don't be shy, come on and frame me. Stick me in your locker or against the wall.
Carol Landis was a Hollywood star who was clever, funny, talented and very beautiful. She had what the cool young people of today call the Riz. That means charisma, by the way, and the press gave her the nickname the Ping Girl, much to her annoyance. Despite all of this, though, despite the ticking of all those boxes, she never quite scaled the superstar heights of some of her Hollywood contemporaries such as Rita Hayworth and Joan Crawford, and her career and life sadly ended up being very short. She did, however, manage to pack a lot into her 29 and a half years, including a handful of very watchable films, thousands of miles of travel as she toured the world entertaining American troops overseas, and an extremely chaotic personal life, including 5 marriages to 4 husbands. I've just checked that, and it is correct. Unsurprisingly, she became a favourite of the muck-raking gossip columnists who gleefully reported every twist and turn of her faltering career and tumultuous love life. Her very untimely death at her own hand on July the 4th, 1948, was a further source of sordid fascination to them, connected as it was to another Hollywood star who had spurned her affections. She was chewed up and spat out by the Hollywood studio system long before Me Too became a hashtag. I could think of only one person I wanted to talk to about Carole Landis: Steve Hayes. Steve's an actor, writer and comedian who has a YouTube channel called Tired Old Queen at the Movies, where he reviews films from Hollywood's golden era, and his knowledge on the subject is encyclopedic. We were unable to meet in person to talk about Carole Landis because Steve is based in New York, which, as it turns out, is in America, but we were able to get together thanks to the power of the internet. Steve Hayes, Tired Old Queen at the Movies. Thank you very much for coming on Soho Bites. It's a pleasure. I'm a big fan of your work.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be. I love London, so I'm thrilled to be talking to the Brits.
And we're here to talk about Carole Landis. She stars in Noose, called The Silk Noose in the US. So set the scene just about her generally. She was 1948, the UK. She was a major Hollywood star, wasn't she? It would have been a big deal for her to be here.
Well, it was at that time. She wasn't considered a major Hollywood star. Let's change that right away.
Right.
She worked her way up from the ranks. She was born in 1939 in Wisconsin. She was one of 5 children, and they lost 2 of them in infancy, and the father deserted the family early. So the mother pulled up stakes and moved them all to California. Well, Carole always had show business in her blood. She would just get up and sing whenever she could. She just was always doing that. She got married when she was 15 to a high school guy, and the marriage was annulled. And then a few months later, they remarried, and that was her first husband. Irving Wheeler was his name. And that was a rocky marriage to begin with. Her history was always revolved around unfortunate choices in men. So she left high school. When she left high school, she made a little money and she moved to San Francisco, and she got a job as a hula dancer in a nightclub.
And she's, 15 at this stage?
Yeah, she's young. She's a baby. And not 15, but not too much older, because she was only 29 when she passed away. So a rumor started at that time that she was working the streets a little bit to make money, and that kind of followed her career. So she stayed there for a while, and then she decided, well, I can't do this. I gotta go to LA. So she went to Los Angeles, and she started showing up at auditions. I failed to mention Carole chose her name because she admired Carole Lombard. Carole Lombard, they met once, but Carole Lombard was not fond of her because Clark Gable made eyes at her at a nightclub, and that was the end of that. So, she was a strikingly gorgeous woman. She had an amazing figure. She had an ample bust line and these long legs, and she was and it's blonde, and she was vivacious. Just personality. She really had it. She was really good. And a lot of men noticed her, and a lot of men went after her, and she worked that for a while, and she got noticed by Busby Berkeley because she kept showing up at dance calls. So he fell in love with her, and he kind of started putting her so she'd be seen. They became lovers. She romanced him. She was still married to Wheeler. And then Wheeler got wise, and he sued her for divorce and said that Busby Berkeley was the correspondent in the divorce. And it was a messy way to start. That didn't go through. They got a divorce.
But they hadn't seen each other for years by this stage, had they?
No, not really. But she thought Busby Berkeley was going to marry her. But Busby Berkeley's mother was a real she was tough. She was tough. And she said, well, I heard rumors that, she had a reputation in San Francisco and that she's, kind of been around, and he didn't marry her, and that broke her heart. But she got noticed then by Republic Pictures, and they put her into some Westerns, but she was just, pretty on the side. And Hal Roach got interested in her. And Hal Roach was from the silent films. Hal Roach was casting 1 Million Years BC, and he saw her, and D.W. Griffith saw her, and he had interviewed a lot of women, and he would take all the women who were auditioning for this movie out in the back lot and say, run. So they'd have to run from one telephone pole to another, back and forth. And he came back and he handed Roach her resume and said, she's the one. She can run. He said, really? This is how we're supposed to cast her? He said, look, they're being chased by dinosaurs constantly. You don't run like a girl. You run like a warrior. So that's what got her cast. And of course, then they put her in the skimpy costume.
And she looked great.
She looked great, with that 40s coiffed hair. She was ready to go. And Victor Mature is gorgeous in it. Victor Mature was always a hunk. So that got her seen. And she started, she was making the rounds, had a lot of dates. She had a lot of dates with a lot of people. She was always in the columns, always. And Daryl F. Zanuck took notice of her.
He was the head of Fox.
Yep. And he brought her into Fox. And he took one look at her and licked his chops and liked what he saw. And they became lovers pretty quick. And he cast her with Betty Grable and Charlotte Greenwood and Donna Michi in a movie called Moon Over Miami.
Oh, me, oh, Miami.
She got to sing a little bit and she got to dance a little bit, and she looked good with Betty Grable, but she was working her way up, and so the next movie was the one that we really loved the most, which is I Wake Up Screaming.
And that's the high point of her career, I Wake Up Screaming.
It is. It's the high point of her career. Well, this movie, for those of your listeners who haven't seen it, it's essentially about a girl who moves to the city, moves to New York with her sister. She's a waitress, and she's strikingly beautiful. And one night, there's a couple of these ne'er-do-wells, Victor Mature and Alan Jocelyn.
And hotcakes and coffee.
Is that all?
No, but the rest of it isn't on the menu.
You couldn't afford it if it was.
Say, you know something?
Yes. I'm wasting my time being just an ordinary waitress.
They make a bet that they could put her over. So Victor Mature takes her out, puts her in a dress, borrow a fur, and they take her to a nightclub. And she is a hit because she's so gorgeous. Betty Grable is her sister, who's the nice girl. She doesn't want to have a career. Why don't you just settle and try to get married? You don't need a career, And Carol Landis's character says, I could be somebody. I was out there last night with these other people. If they could do it, I could do it, which was really kind of ahead of its time. In those years, if you were a career girl, it just meant, well, she can't get married, so she's a career girl.
It does kind of reflect her life a bit, doesn't it, as well? Kind of using what she's got to get where she got to.
Oh, absolutely, Dom. She was tenacious as all get out. She really was. So this one thing leads to another, and she gets murdered. Even though she's only in the movie for about 20 minutes tops. She has a great range. She goes from being really kind of sweet and nice to you watch her gradually change. Not that she's evil, but she just decides I'm taking control. I'm ambitious. She plays each one of these men who had played her. She plays each one of them off each other, which is really smart. Which of course by 40 standards made her a bad woman.
Yeah. Women did have to have a sort of particular standard of behavior, didn't they? I mean, they were categorized into sort of good girls and bad girls.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, it was the old adage too. And that was in their personal lives as well. If you were a man and you played around and you had all these girlfriends and slept with everybody, you were hot stuff. You were a good guy. If you were a woman, you were a tramp. You were a tramp. And that label, we're still kicking that label. And all of the stuff that's been happening in the business now about like with Harvey Weinstein and all that stuff going down, that was so prevalent then, because by that time, Daryl Zanuck closed his studio down at 4:00 every afternoon for a half an hour while a young starlet came into his office and serviced him. And it was rumored that Carol was one of those girls. So I Wake Up Screaming was a big hit. And then she said no to Zanuck. And he slowly began diminishing her career and putting her in B projects and secondary parts. Her last good role in an A kind of movie was a movie called My Gal Sal, which she's only in for 15 minutes.
And this was revenge on Xanax's
Oh, yeah.
part. Right.
Absolutely. Punishing her right there. By this time, she was off Wheeler. She had married this other guy, Willis Hunt, who was a yachtsman. That's what they called him. He was a yachtsman. Well, that marriage lasted a month. And then he was gone. So by this time, she'd been married twice, but she'd had 3 marriages because she married the one guy twice. So they put her in My Gal Sal, and Carol at that time had already started doing pinup shots. And Hal Roach's publicity guy had named her the Ping Girl.
Yeah, explain this ping girl.
All right,
thing.
the ping girl. The ping girl was supposed to be the ping you hear when you're in your car engine when it isn't right. And Carol was the person who made it smooth and running smooth.
Okay.
And of course, there was another connotation about it, that the ping was what you got, what men got below the waist when they saw her, the ping in the pants, you know. I was going to say the ping in the pants is were 3 in the bush, but never mind. So she hated that and wrote to the columnist and said, which everybody always said, oh, she's just trying to get publicity. She wasn't. She was sticking up for herself. And she said, I don't want to be known as the ping girl. I want to be an actress. And of course, by that time, it was all over town that she was Xanax girl. But everybody loved her. Everybody liked her. She was nice. She was friendly. She was warm, and she was fun.
She does seem very likable.
She was very likable. She was very sensitive, though. Very, very super sensitive. So by that time, the war started. And she wasn't getting much action there. So she was very patriotic. She used to go to the Hollywood canteen. Since she decided she was going to go and entertain troops. And she did. She went on this tour. And she went with Kay Francis, Martha Ray, and this dancer singer named Mitzi Mayfair. And they went to England and toured all the troops around England, all the bases. And then they went to North Africa. And she ended up, by the end of the war, traveling more than any other star in Hollywood. They figured she'd done over 100,000 miles all over the world. 100,000. And of course, she was gone a long time. While she was in England, she met this guy, an American flyer who'd gone over to join the RAF at the beginning of the war, named Tommy Wallace. And good looking. And she married him, and they had a big wedding in London. Big wedding. And it was all Life magazine was there. And of course, this is her 4th marriage, but it didn't matter. She got married in white. Big wedding. And this was the one that was going to stick, and he was good looking and everything else. And she went right back on the road again. He had to go back to service, and so did she. And she came back to the States. And by the time she came back to the States, her career was winding down. Fox was not using her. She had written a book about her travels. 4 Jills in a Jeep. Did you ever see it?
I've seen the film. I've not read the book.
You've seen the film. I have never even seen the film. I knew the book, the 4 Jills in a Jeep. And I heard that the film was not great.
I mean, it's not fantastic.
Couldn't you stay over?
Oh, I'd love to, but we take orders from the Army, too.
I'll find you. I'll look you up the minute I get leave. Good luck with your show.
Good luck with yours.
In the film, she does get married, but
to that guy. Tommy Wallace. Yeah.
But it's love forever in that version, obviously.
Yeah. Well, of course it is. Which was forever for her was about 2 more months. They never lasted long. Her husband's never lasted long. Of course, when the movie came out, when they made that cheesy movie version of 4 Jills in a Jeep, the press went after her and said, she's just trying to drum up publicity and this is shameless and stuff. And it was the studio that made it that way. Her version, her book was not like that. So her marriage to Tommy Wallace ended because he got tired of being Mr. Carol Landis, and he got tired of wanting a woman that everybody else wanted.
Yeah, and he's not from that world at all, was he? He wasn't he wasn't a kind of glitzy flash guy.
Not at all. And she was a sex symbol. Carol Landis was a sex symbol. She posed for endless cheesecake. She even sang a song, I'm your pinup girl. And she goes behind things, she comes out in something scanty, and then she goes behind something and comes out in something scantier, she looked cute. So then she made a movie. She got loaned out to United Artists, and she made a movie with Douglas Sirk, one of my favorite directors. So Sirk was melodrama. He came out of UFA Studios too in Berlin. And he had been, at that time, he was making movies like Sleep, My Love, film noirs. With Carol Landis, he made a movie called Scandal in Paris, A Scandal in Paris.
I like your curly hair, monsieur. You have that certain flair, monsieur. We'd make a lovely pair, monsieur, but my flame is for us. General.
That was sort of a prestige sort of movie. And then she married this guy, her last husband, Horace Schmidlap.
Yeah, he's a funny-looking fellow. I've seen.
Oh, is he ever? Oh
Yeah.
my God! Did you see those teeth? That guy could eat pie through a picket fence. Did you? My God, that guy had the. Oh my God! You look at his teeth. I looked at the pictures in the book and I went, "Whoa!" Oh, sorry. Whoa. Oh, my, he was so. Oh my God! Well, talk about. Oh yeah, you married him for love. Now,
He must
honey,
have
you
had
married.
something else going for
He
him.
had a
Yeah.
lot of money. He was a producer. He was a Broadway producer. So she decided she was going to try her luck at Broadway. She met him while she was doing Broadway. She did a Broadway show. The woman said yes, and the critics said no. But she, the lady said yes. She met Jackie Suzanne while she was doing that, who wrote Valley of the Dolls.
Oh, right. Okay. Wow.
And she had a love affair. Carol had a love affair with Jackie Suzanne.
Right.
And it was pretty torrid. And it was just for the run of that show. But Jackie Suzanne based the character of Jennifer North in Valley of the Dolls that was played by Sharon Tate in the movie on Carol Landis.
That's why people listen to Soho Bites. It's for
Yes.
that kind of background gossip
Yes.
from a long
Yes.
time ago that we like.
Haven't I given you enough gossip so far?
That is a particular nugget that might well go on the
Oh,
poster.
good. All right. Well, good. I hope. So that ended. And she married Schmidlap. And then she met Rex Harrison.
Yes.
He was the matinee idol. He was always catnip to women. I never got it, but he was involved with Lily Palmer. He'd been married to her for years. She had escaped the Nazis. She's a great little actress in her own right. And she was very aware of her husband's peccadillos. And it was all over town that he was having an affair with Carol Landis. And Carol fell under his charm and fell madly in love with him. And he was hired to go to England to film a movie called Escape. He flew there and she followed him. Well, she had been so popular in England that she made a couple of movies there. The first one was a hit. She made, both of these movies were not released until after she was dead.
Yeah.
Which was too bad. The Noose was the second one. The first one was called
Brass Monkey?
Yes, Brass Monkey. Thank you. But she was happy with them because they gave her a chance. They gave her good roles. You know, she got to solve murders and she got to be, to be funny and she got to be sexy. She had nice clothes. And she got to work and be with and sneak off
to see Rex.
She's
not blonde in Noose either. She's kind of, you get the impression she's starting to become a bit more mature and stuff.
Yeah. And also all that traveling and all of that heartache and stuff had taken it out of her. She was getting a little world weary. She's getting depressed. Around that time, Lupe Velez had killed herself 2 years earlier. And she commented at the time that she understood how that happened because she said, I can understand why she did that because she doesn't know what her future is going to be, where her looks are going, what kind of future she has. She has no children. Carol could not have children. She had a physical problem.
Endometriosis, wasn't it?
Yes, endometriosis. And that was a big problem with her. So she was having this affair. Schmidlap didn't seem to mind. He kind of like ignored it, but they didn't get divorced. And Lily Palmer said to Rex Harrison, look, you got to make up your mind here because you're either going to go with her. I've had enough. I everywhere I go, people are whispering, oh, there's poor Lily Palmer. Well, her husband's fooling around with Carol Landis. She said, I had it. So she said in her autobiography, she said, I jumped up. I said, you make up your mind. I'm going back to New York. And she flew back to New York. At that time, Rex got an offer to come to New York and film the stage version of Anne of the Thousand Days as Henry VIII. And he was so excited about it. And he went to Carol. It was July 4th. And he went to Carol's house to have dinner with her. And he announced that he was going to be going to New York to do this. And that meant a long haul in New York and essentially going back to Lily Palmer. He said at the time, well, I didn't really notice anything about her. I thought she was fine. I really didn't notice. So he went off to Carol to visit his friend Roland Culver. When he was gone, Carol packed up all of her things into a suitcase, all his love letters that he had written her, any correspondence they'd had into a suitcase and took them over to Roland Culver's house and left them at his door. And then she went back and she took an overdose of Secanols.
And it was quite a large overdose, wasn't it? It wasn't a cry for help. It was a
No.
definite, I'm doing this.
They found her. Rex Harrison couldn't get in. He got the maid. They broke into her house and they found her in the bathroom. And she was lying on her stomach. She had her hands up like this behind her, as if she had been trying to lift herself off the floor.
Mm.
And she just collapsed and she was gone. And she left a message for her mother. And they called the police. The police came and Rex explained to himself. But Luella and Hedda had a field day.
Oh, yeah.
They blamed Rex Harrison for the whole thing. They said sexy Rexy. That's what Hedda called him. Sexy Rexy. From then on, he never could escape it. And Lily Palmer, to her credit, got right back on a plane. She was getting off the plane at the airport, saw a newspaper that said Carol Landis dead on the coast. She turned right around and got back on the plane and went back. And she and Rex went to Carol's funeral together.
I read that Rex Harrison, when they found the body, he felt her pulse and there was a faint pulse and he disappeared off.
And he ran off.
Called the studio.
Yeah.
Didn't call the police straight away. Called the studio to clear it all up.
That's what they all did. You know,
it's like the William Desmond Taylor situation.
Same with Jean Harlow when her husband killed himself in her bathroom. Same with Lana Turner. You know, lot of stuff.
Very sad.
Carol was 29 and she died.
So at the funeral, there was kind of a sort of not a riot as such, but the fans got a little bit out of hand, didn't they?
Yeah. Everybody took flowers from her grave and everything, it was but that was par for the course. They were all of those funerals were circuses, but Carol Landis was fondly remembered by everybody. Everybody liked her and everybody felt bad because they knew the system had killed her.
Yeah, I get the impression that she tried to play the system. She used what she had, which was her like great beauty and everything, and it kind of she overplayed her hand almost.
Well, I don't think she could do anything else because once that was established, you were typecast. You were typecast out there in your roles. You were typecast in your life. And once she was known as the studio head's girlfriend, she couldn't let go of that moniker. She couldn't rise above that so much.
Do you think that if she hadn't died so young, her career would have come out of this slump and it would have rejuvenated?
She might have gone into television.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility, yeah.
But her glamour puss days were done, because after she died, the next step was Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was right on the horizon. And already Rita Hayworth's career was petering out. Betty Grable's career was petering out. All of those people from that particular time. Veronica Lake was done. But I think she was tired. I think she looked at this as well, one more guy has used me, broken my heart and used me. And I just can't do it. And she wrote in her suicide letter, she said that, I think this is the only way. Mother, I love you and I'm sorry. Forgive me for doing this. I'm leaving everything to you, but I just can't do it anymore. This is the only way. And that was it.
Thank you to Steve Hayes, tired old queen at the movies, for coming on Soho Bites to talk about Carol Landis. I hope we managed to be respectful there to a person who was clearly as troubled as she was talented. Check out Steve's awesome YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/@SteveHayesTOQ. I'll put a link to that in the show notes, along with another link to a video in which Steve appears playing God in a film called The Big Gay Musical. I assume that means happy. The Big Happy Musical. All of that can be found at sohobitespodcast.com. Our film for this episode, Noose, was based on a stage play of the same name by Robert Llewellyn. It ran for 5 months in London in 1947, and in the show's programme there's a quote on the cover by the poet Alexander Pope, which reads, "In vain may heroes fight and patriots rave, if secret gold creeps on from nave to nave." In other words, it doesn't matter how bravely soldiers fight or how passionately patriots make speeches, all of it is pointless if those who hold power are corrupt behind the scenes. Pope was actually taking a swipe at the corruption of Robert Walpole's government in 1733, according to Professor Wikipedia, But Robert Llewellyn and the director of the film version, Edmund T. Greville, had a different bunch of corrupt people in their sights, the crooks, spivs and black marketeers who ran Soho in the years after the Second World War. Noose is a film in which we see people starting to fight back. The film's anti-hero, Bar Gorman, played by Nigel Patrick, is a classic spiv. Sharp clothes and fast talking, he's obviously a crook. We see in the first 5 minutes that he deals in stolen ration books and counterfeit money, but he's connected to the community in which he operates and has fostered much goodwill by supplying, sometimes for free, those little commodities that were in short supply during the years of rationing.
Morning, Charlie. Hiya, Gav. Hiya, Jiggy boy. Morning, Miss Gorman.
Bye, darling.
Yes, my love?
We're out of tea.
Tea? Couple of pounds, do you?
Oh, anything will do me, dear.
Morning, all. Morning, Tony. A couple of pounds of tea for old Nelly, the costumer, and don't take no money. Right over.
But throughout the film runs the idea that while brave men were off fighting the Nazis, men like Bar Gorman, who we find out later in the film was earning the modern equivalent of £14,000 a week, were profiting from the nation's misery, and this must have been particularly galling to a contemporary audience. Bar Gorman's partner in crime is Sugiani, played by the Maltese actor Joseph Kalir. He's an altogether much more sinister character and has no problem dishing out severe violence either personally or through his gang of roughnecks. Sugiani's nickname, Nuxie, is a reference to his weapon of choice, the knuckle duster. Incidentally, the part of Sugiani was played on stage by Charles Goldner, who played a similar gang boss type role in Brighton Rock. The noose of the title refers to two different things: the silk stocking, which is used to strangle people who get on the wrong side of Sugiani, and to Operation Noose. This is a disruptive vigilante campaign instigated by the recently demobbed Jumbo Hoyle, played by Derek Farr, aimed at bringing down the gangsters. It's actually more of a pincer movement than a noose, because as well as Jumbo and his assortment of dockers, taxi drivers and Billingsgate fish porters, Sugiani and his gang are also under pressure from the police in the form of the always brilliant Stanley Holloway, and by the press, the public face of which is Linda Medbury, played by Carol Landis. She's a fashion journalist from Chicago who's been posted to the UK to work on a London newspaper, but when she comes across a distraught Annie Foss, played by Ruth Nixon, she becomes a campaigning crime journalist.
Suppose you let me take you home, huh? What's this?
Metropolitan Police. Admit Annie Foss to Riverside Mortuary.
Did you say strangled?
Murdered. They threw her in the river. I saw her.
Who?
Fille charmante. She was my friend. So good, so kind. Oh, pauvre.
Let's go somewhere else and talk.
I'd like to find out more about this. It might prove very interesting.
Linda is independent and fearless, perhaps even reckless if you listen to her fiancé Jumbo, and takes on Sugiani's gang by writing exposés of their activities, which puts her in immense danger. She's also presented as being a bit scatty. A recurring gag is that she takes her shoes off wherever she is and forgets to put them back on again. In the very final scene, Jumbo too has lost his shoes, suggesting perhaps, now that Linda has been instrumental in bringing down the gangsters, that the two of them will enter their marriage on an equal footing. Footing. Do you see? Although the film has a certain darkness to it that comes from the ever-present potential for murder and violence, this is counterbalanced by touches of humour from Bar Gorman and the jaunty devil-may-care presence of Linda Medbury. I can't help feeling, though, that the film loses its way towards the end when the noose begins to tighten on the gang and it all seems to descend into slapstick farce. Noose was directed by Edmund T. Greville, who also directed Beat Girl, a classic Soho film that we talked about in episode 37. He's an interesting character, and I talked about him a bit with my next guest, Joe Botting, and Noose was part of what has been termed the Spiv cycle of films. This is a loose cluster of films in the late 1940s that featured spivs, sometimes as lovable rogues or sometimes as something a bit darker. And if you don't know what a spiv is, I'm thinking particularly of our overseas listeners here, the origin of the word is disputed, but the term generally refers to a type of shady, low-level criminal who flourished during and just after the war, when the opportunities to steal, buy and sell all sorts of rationed goods were at their most plentiful. They were mostly in London, mostly in their 20s and 30s, and they dressed in a particular way, flashy, garish suits, expensive shoes and cufflinks, and usually a pencil-thin moustache. I've put a link in the show notes to a great article by Bill Norton called Meet the Spiv, which appeared in the News Chronicle in 1945. He characterises the distinctive way a spiv walks as a mixture of pug and pansy. To talk about Noose, Edmund T. Greville, the Spiv cycle and more, I was delighted that Dr. Josephine Botting agreed to return to Soho Bites. Jo is a curator at the BFI and, among many other things I could say about her, runs monthly screenings of rarely seen films from the BFI National Archive in a slot called Projecting the Archive. I met up with Jo in what is rapidly becoming my default recording location, the gallery of the Museum of Soho at 75 Dean Street. I began by asking her to go back to the origins of the film and, as I knew she would, she'd really done her research.
Noose was written by Richard Llewellyn, the writer who's most famous for How Green Was My Valley. So this was kind of not really his territory, but he submitted a screenplay to the BBFC in 1937 of a film called Murder in Soho. And at that point in time, the BBFC was very hardline about content of films, and the screenplay was turned down. It dealt with prostitution. It was a very similar plotline, basically, to Noose. So that didn't go anywhere in 1937. And I get the sense that after the war, he thought, let me dig out that old screenplay I wrote. What could I do with it? Or maybe during the war, he was thinking about this. And so he rewrote it as a stage play. He went on to produce it on stage. It opened at the Savile Theatre on Shaftesbury Avenue on the 20th of June, 1947. And it ran until the 15th of November, 47, which is pretty good going for a first play. It was very successful. It got mixed reviews, but it did very well. And it sounds like a really interesting play. It was 11 short scenes, basically, and they were broken up by telephone conversations. So on either side of the stage, there were these lighted phone booths. So in between each scene, a telephone conversation would happen. So it was a very dynamic kind of play, not as stage-bound as many were at the time. It was also very, very expensive, the reviewers said. It had 5 different sets, which was a lot for a West End play at that time. And numbers of cast vary from about 40 to 50. I mean, it's a huge cast as well, which is presumably why it's never been restaged. It was on at the Savile Theatre, which is kind of on the edges of Soho, I guess. And the critics made a big thing about the fact that the audiences were coming out of the theatre right into the very place where the action had actually happened. And it started a bit later than other plays were. Usually 7 p.m. was the start time, but they started at 8. So they were coming out at 11 into the back streets of Soho. So it did fantastically well. It got generally good reviews. And Nigel Patrick plays Bar Gorman in this play.
He's the only one, isn't he, who is in both the film and the play?
Yeah. That's right. And I think watching the film, it's very clear that he made that role what it is, Bar Gorman. He really grabbed that part with both hands and made himself the star of the play almost. I mean, some of the reviews refer to the character of Jumbo Hoyle, who's our hero, played by Derek Farr in the film. It was actually played on stage by Michael Hordern. And one of the critics referred to him as a fatuous ass, basically.
Yeah, I think I got that from the film, actually.
Yeah, it's not much of a role. I mean, I guess you kind of need that, the good and the bad side of things. You need the sort of good triumphing over bad. So you kind of need that character. But as most of the critics said, the interesting characters are the baddies.
Yeah.
Sujani was played by Charles Goldner, Austrian actor, who, again, got very good reviews. And most of the critics said that the best thing about this play is the interaction between Sujani and Gorman.
The film doesn't feel like it's come from the stage. Some films do, don't they?
Exactly. And I think maybe that's a reflection on how good the stage play was. But as I said, it had 5 scene changes, which is a lot. It wasn't set in 2 locations, which, as you say, most stage plays to film, there was always this sense you had to open it out. But I think there isn't necessarily that sense with this film. And obviously Llewellyn worked on the screenplay, having already written one in 37, 10 years before. So I think he was in control of that narrative anyway. So he kind of knew what he wanted the locations to be. So I think it works. It does work really well as a film, and it never feels stagey at all.
No. Presumably, with this, the first version being pre-war and the second version being post-war, there's this new element now, which is the Spivs. And it crops up as part of the Spiv cycle of films, which isn't anything to do with washing machines. Is it a cycle?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Soho it's probably always been a sort of place where there's dodgy stuff going on. And the best thing written about the Spiv cycle is by Robert Murphy in his book Realism a Tinsel. He's got a whole chapter on the Spiv cycle, which is really, really worth reading if you're interested. But he says that in the 30s, there were a lot of kind of gangs who were involved with racehorse betting, and they were quite famous gangs, usually run by Italians who were operating these sort of betting rings, I guess. I don't know enough about these things to know what
I think we've covered that already. Sambinis and people like that.
Yeah, but obviously the war just gave lots more opportunities for stuff, to happen. So, obviously rationing during the war was meant to be a leveling thing so that everybody got the same. But of course, if you had money, you could buy stuff on the black market, and there were plenty of people out there who would steal and supply stuff or come by stuff illicitly that they would then sell, if you had the money, or exchange for other things that people wanted.
The Spivs that I was aware of growing up in popular culture were Captain Walker, Sergeant Walker from Dad's Army, the George Cole character from St. Trinian's.
Yeah.
And they're sort of these jolly characters, but actually they're nasty people.
Well, I guess some of them were not nasty. I don't know. I mean, some of them would try and make a living, I guess. But yeah, obviously the Spiv cycle sort of does present a more menacing sort of side of that underworld. But that's melodrama, really, isn't it? I mean, that's, a lot of critics compared it to they said, well, it's great to have some melodrama back on the screen because, where's Todd Slaughter or where's Edgar Wallace? All that stuff sort of stopped being made in the 30s. So it almost felt like a comeback with this new kind of villain, which was obviously very contemporary and spoke to people's experience at the time.
Is Brighton Rock a Spiv film? Or because it's set before the war, isn't it?
So this is the thing. Yeah, so, Robert Murphy's got a great rundown. And I think Waterloo Road is the first sort of Spiv movie which deals with the sort of central issue is that all the good men have gone off to fight in the war, leaving the dodgy people who've managed to get out of going to war, and we're told that Sujani has said he's a farmer, which is why he's not being called up.
He's lucky not to be interned, actually, what with him being a dodgy foreigner.
That's right. Yeah, he's not very specific about his
British foreigner.
Yeah, which is a great line. But he does certainly sound Italian. He probably would have found a way around that as well, I guess, given the power that he has.
On the subject of the good people going away and fighting and the Donald Trump bone spur type staying behind, Jumbo has a line where he talks about it's pretty rum to be going over to war and fighting those stinkers, getting rid of those stinkers, and then you come back to Soho and get rid of some more stinkers. Yeah. So that I can imagine that's bubbling under a lot at that time.
Well, again, as I said, Waterloo Road is kind of the first of these, 1943.
Who's the
Stuart Granger.
Stuart Granger, that's right.
So, John Mills has gone off to war and he hears that his girlfriend or wife, I can't remember because I haven't seen it.
Is hanging out with
dodgy people. So he comes back to sort that out. So it's a kind of melodrama in a sense, but the Spiv is kind of the narrative point that makes the story happen. I think you could call it a cycle. I think Robert Murphy certainly makes a good case for that. But you did ask me about Brighton Rock. Now, obviously it's set in 1936. Personally, I don't consider it a Spiv film, because there's sort of spivvy characters in it, but I wouldn't classify Pinky Brown as a Spiv because I think he's far beyond that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a psychopathic.
One of his henchmen looks quite spivvy. I can't remember who.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There's spivvy types in it, but it's not about Spivs. It's about him, I think. But, people do include it, and it's obviously not, period-wise, it's not set after the war. And Robert Murphy also includes the third man in that, he's an international Spiv.
That. Yeah, I can understand that.
Again, for me, a Spiv film has to be set in the UK.
Yeah, and they have to look like a Spiv with a little thin moustache and everything. Otherwise,
that's what we want, isn't it?
Because I think Spivs now, if there's a similar situation now, Spivs would be wearing tracksuits and that kind of thing, wouldn't they? It was just like the fashion of the day.
Yeah. I've got a wonderful book called An Indiscreet Guide to Soho. And it actually talks about crime in Soho before the war, I assume, because he's talking about a few years prior to 46 when this book was published. And he says, you may recall French Fifi, who was strangled by a silk stocking in Archer Street.
Oh, yes.
So whether Llewellyn had read this story or whether it's just, a nice kind of twist, because I think, as you mentioned, silk stockings were something that...
It's very spivvy. I mean, that's one of the premium items they sold,
the black
wasn't it?
market would have been dealing in. Yeah, as we were always hearing in films that silk stockings were the hard things to get hold of.
Hence the gravy browning and the line at the back of the leg,
Yes,
that thing.
Exactly.
This tale is spun to us that people all pulled together during the war, and that gets undermined quite quickly after the war's finished with films like this. A Night in the City. Oh, there's a Spiv film.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
Well, he's American. I don't know, again, I don't know if that qualifies him to be a Spiv.
People making money out of everybody else's misery,
Yeah.
isn't it?
The character in Night in the City, though, he's trying to do something. He's trying to generate some legal kind of ways to make money.
Yeah, he's trying to go straight, isn't he?
Yeah. But it's tough. I mean, I think that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's go on to Greville. Or is it Grovey? How do you say it?
Edmond Greville was British, but he grew up in France.
Right.
So I just, Greville, I think, is what we say. I admit that the French probably say Greville, but I'm not going to do that. Let's just call him Greville.
Have confidence, Grevs.
Yeah.
So this is the third podcast episode done about him. One was for Kino Quickies, about Brief Ecstasy, who's the name of the film. The other one was for Soho Bites and his Beat Girl, and now this. And so there's 3 different decades, 30s, 40s, and end of the 50s. Yeah. Completely different films. And they do, all of them seem to reflect quite strongly, or are trying to reflect their time. Is that what he's doing? Is he trying to be a very, very contemporary filmmaker, do you think?
So I think Greville had a very difficult career, and he would do whatever film came his way. I think a lot of the films he made were not personal projects. I can give you a little bit of his background if that's of interest. So he wrote a novel. He was obviously very precocious. He wrote a novel at 16. And so he was a poet and a writer. And he moved to Paris with his family and sort of started hanging out with the surrealists in the 20s, basically. So Jacques Brunius, Jacques Becker, Jean Mitry. And they were real cineasts, these people. So he idolized von Stroheim and King Vidor. So Greville and that sort of group were doing very similar things, I think, in the 20s, in that they were looking at cinema as an art form and trying to, consolidate that in their own work. And I found a nice description of him in a British newspaper as a cheerful young fellow who cannot direct comfortably without wearing his hat at the back of his head. And he's a man of ideas and unassuming energy. So he starts directly very young in France, really well. He works under E.A. Dupont in the early 30s, but he starts making films in France, which was obviously easier for him to do because he was an artist filmmaker in a sense. So he made some very forthright films about sexuality and
Brief Ecstasy
other problems. Well, that's
forthright.
A British film, but in France he makes the film that's a really breakthrough for him is called Remous or Whirlpool, 1935. And it's all about a man's impotence, basically. And it did get released in the UK. Apparently, it broke all records at the Curzon Mayfair when it opened here. So then he went on. That obviously got him attention in the UK. So he makes Gypsy Melody with Lupi Velez, which is his first British feature. And I think he just went where the work was. So he makes Princess Tam Tam with Josephine Baker. He likes Lupi Velez, Josephine Baker, Carol Landis. Yeah. Very much, yeah. And I mean, his films are very hard to see. So I've watched a couple of his French films, and they are completely different to his British films. So he obviously had a very clear understanding of what each national cinema would allow him to do. So his French films are very atmospheric. I mean, to me, they look like poetic realism. I watched one which he made just before Noose, actually, called Le Diable Souffle. The devil blows, I guess. It's very atmospheric, lots of wind blowing in the reeds and things like that. But it's a beautiful film, but very far away from what he was kind of knew he could get away with in Britain. I mean, British films, you were never going to be able to make a British film like that. the British producers were never going to tolerate that kind of artistic expression.
Arty-farty nonsense. Yeah.
But given that was very important to him, I think there were two things that were really important to him: sex. And Tavernier writes that you could never separate his cinema from his libido. So I don't quite know.
All the three films I've seen,
Yeah.
they're all sex heavy, if there can be such a thing.
But I think at the same time, he was trying to bring as much artistry into his filmmaking as he could. And I think you mentioned Brief Ecstasy, which to me is one of the best British films of the 1930s. And it's probably the first British film really to deal honestly and sympathetically with women's sexuality.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful film.
It is fantastic. One of Martin Scorsese's favourites.
Well, you say that, but long before Martin Scorsese, Bertrand Tavernier befriended Greville at the end of his life. So it's thanks to Bertrand Tavernier that we are able to see these films, because Tavernier was a good friend of David Meeker, who was my first boss at the BFI, and Meeker has made new prints of both Noose and Brief Ecstasy. So it's thanks to them that we can actually see these films. So we're all kind of,
standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yes. So Tavernier became a good friend of his. And in fact, when Greville died in 1966, penniless, they actually raised the money to bury him at that point. He got married in 1928 and his wife was an actress, Vanda Greville, she became. They had a little cottage in Westgate-on-Sea, where, interestingly, the family still live, because I've visited them. I visited Greville's daughter at one point when the family was sort of thinking, can we get, are there any residuals that we can get from all these films that he made? But I definitely got the impression that they didn't think much of Monty Greville within the...
Really?
Well, I don't think he stayed with Vanda. I don't know the exact details of the relationship, but he was off and about and doing his thing. I'm not sure. He was not a family man, let's say. But the family, interestingly, is still kind of based where Vanda settled. One of the films I would love to see of his is called Marchand d'Amour, which is about a film director, which he made in France in 1936. And apparently they managed to find a print of it in Hungary, apparently. So, these cineasts in the late 50s were doing their best to try and rescue his films from skips, literally.
Can we do a season of the BFI? Come on, Joe.
Well, we talked about, the BFI has done a tribute to Greville. We did it back in the 80s.
The body of a young woman aged about 22 was recovered from the Thames by river police. Believed to be Millie Sharp of Redmayne Street, Soho.
I've got a nice little description of what Soho was like at that time. So again, this is from an indiscreet guide to Soho from 1946. Soho has become a centre of racketeering. There are dozens of small cafes where you can smell the underworld as soon as you poke your head inside the door. The swarthy proprietor takes no pains to offer hospitality. Sorry, no sandwiches. If you ask for a cup of tea or coffee, he says no milk. Should you scale the sullen barrier, you will have to face the barrage of a dozen pair of suspicious eyes through the cigarette smoke. The boys are deciding if you are a bogey, a copper, or maybe a grass informer. I just think that's such a nice evocation of what Soho was like. And obviously that's what the film is trying to convey, but it does it all within the studio pretty much. The only location shots really are right at the very start of the film. So we open with this sort of sweeping panorama across the rooftops. You see Nelson's Column, you see the Houses of Parliament, and then it's sort of bringing us in. But really, that's the extent of the location stuff that we get. And then we start in a church, which is really interesting. It's actually St Barnabas in Manette Street is where it was filmed.
Oh, okay. So that's not a studio, that church shot.
Well, they zoom on the board, but you do actually see a sort of establishing shot of the church, and it's St Barnabas in Manette Street, but they call it St Giuseppe.
Giuseppe, yeah.
Yeah, weird. But it obviously the camera then zooms in on Soho, so but it's great because we're plunged into the world of Bar Gorman, and he takes us on a journey through the streets of Soho. We meet the people he meets, and it's a great opening. It's very dynamic.
Really good, yeah.
But of course, as you say, it's all studio bound. So it's filmed at the Warner's studio in Teddington, which had just reopened very recently. The studio had been bombed in July 1944 and destroyed. So it had been rebuilt over the 3 years intervening. And I think some productions had started the year before, but I think this was the final stage being reopened. It was opened by Danny Kaye. He came down to open it. And there's a wonderful Pathé newsreel you can see online where you could see Stanley Holloway and some of the cast of Noose and them actually setting up to film it within there.
Is it the first film since it reopened then?
I think there was filming done in September, but I think it was one of the first films to be made after Teddington Studios reopened. But I don't know why it was completely studio bound, but I think if you're going to control the images to the extent that Greville does, it's much easier to do it in the studio.
Yeah.
And there's so much thought gone into the framing, the cuts between scenes, that I think being studio bound was much, much easier.
And it's mostly interiors anyway, isn't it? I mean, there's not much.
Well, it's a stage play, so I guess it will be. But it's quite odd because they start out obviously just the San Giuseppe's doesn't exist, but then when they're planning their raid, when Hoyle gets his gang together and they've got this great map on the board, it's completely made up places. Redmayne Street, places that don't exist.
I had to
in
Google
Soho at all.
Redmayne Street. I thought, is that an actual place?
No,
because there are these little alleyway streets in Soho that you might not necessarily know, but no, it's not on there.
No, which is odd in a way, but
yeah.
Perhaps I could arrange a meeting. Say, tomorrow afternoon at my office.
I like very much to do business with you, Miss Montgomery. Publicity, huh? Make me very, very happy. A little present.
Put that away.
Not like? Curious, huh? Listen, sweetheart.
Get out.
Capriccious, huh?
Maxie, get out of here.
Not.
And take this overcoat with you.
Miss Montgomery. I can be nice. I can be not nice.
Should we talk about cast then?
Okay.
Steve talked about Carol a lot,
yeah,
which the audience have just heard, so we probably won't touch on her much. Nigel Patrick, he's obviously the star of the film as Bar Gorman.
Yeah.
And he played the same role in the stage play, but he's only sort of mid-billing in the credits. Is that just to do with star agents and that sort of thing?
Definitely. I mean, the casting of Carol Landis was a marketing ploy. Obviously she's being American and a star. They feel that's going to get audiences in. It's a good name to have on the poster. It's a nice role, and I think her character Linda Medbury is from Chicago. She's obviously very bright, very astute, very alert, a bit scatty.
Forgets her shoes,
but also very caring and curious and caring. I think because I think that first. It's a really good scene where you see Annie Foss, who's just been to see the body of Millie
Sharp.
Yes, and there's this very unusual kind of surreal sound montage going on where she's very sinister barrel organ and then
absinthe fueled kind of montage.
Yeah. And then she staggers and Linda goes to help her, and hence the whole narrative stems from that. So she's clearly wasted on this fashion journalism that she's been brought over from Chicago to do, apparently. But she is modelling the new look all the way through. So that's...
very funny hat costume at one
there
point.
There is that's an ill-advised hat, in my opinion. But, it's striking.
It is.
That's for sure, because we both noticed it.
Yeah.
So she's a really interesting character. But, I mean, I think that the issue with the film is one of tone. And I think that's something that you picked up as well, that it's trying to do too many things. It's trying to present this story of the underworld, but do it in a slightly glib way, I suppose, and maybe soften that aspect of it with this very... And actually, she's never really in peril at any point in the film.
No, there's one moment of peril, I think, when Bar and Sugiani go round and Bar kind of pushes her. He goes off to look for Annie.
Yeah, and he's got a brilliant line. He says, "Oh, that's my army training."
Yeah, which again is a sort of shows him up for what he is, which is a shirker.
Absolutely,
from
and he knows it.
Yeah,
he knows it. That scene's quite interesting, actually.
In her flat,
the scene where Bar and Sugiani go to Linda Medbury's flat, which again sort of walks this line between comedy and menace in a sense.
Because Annie is hiding away in a bedroom.
Partly that, yeah, but also, I mean, as you mentioned, there's that moment where Bar pushes her onto the sofa, which is pretty shocking, actually. given the way the scene's been going up until then. But that scene to me feels very much like something directly from the play, because what you've got is Nigel Patrick doing his business in the background, which on stage he would have just been doing in the background, eating the chocolates. Yeah. Which is in itself is quite menacing, because obviously he turns up with chocolates and flowers and then eats the chocolates and then takes them away when he goes. I mean, it's a nice little touch. But it feels very much like, so you've got Sujani like telling his life story of how he clawed up his way up from them, rummaging in bins and made good. You've got Bile Gorman in the background kind of doing his thing as well. So obviously Greville cuts between those two, but you get the sense that all this would have been happening on stage.
And it's that scene where we realise that actually Sujani and Bar are kind of a partnership. Sujani is nominally the boss of the gang and Bar is his deputy, but actually they sort of control it duly. They just have these separate roles.
Well, it's interesting because when the film starts and you first see Bile Gorman, striding through the streets of Soho, my assumption was, all right, he's in charge of this gang, and you quickly learn. But Sujani refers to him as his I think he says clerk, but Clark is his clerk. He has quite a menial kind of role within the organisation. But the whole point of their relationship is that Sujani is ruthless, and Bar, although he has a menacing side, he doesn't want people to be murdered. He feels
business.
He feels that that's a step too far. So that it's that dynamic between them. And as I said, in the play as well, that was singled out by so many critics as the key sort of relationship and the key energy to the film was this relationship. And I love, and there are some lines like Nigel Patrick going, "Don't go on and on and on and on." And I wonder whether that's in the play, because it feels like a catchphrase almost,
And he says at one point, "Isn't it marvellous? Isn't it marvellous?" I think I've heard that before. I think somebody says that. Is it Steptoe or somebody?
Could be, yeah.
But actually, Sujani asks Bar at one point how much he earns, and he says 300 a week, some extras. And I thought, that must be a lot of money.
Yeah.
So he's clearly not just a deputy. Sujani is like obsessed with the opulence and appearing to have all the best stuff and telling people Trump-like that he has all the best stuff.
Well, if he's asking him how much he's earning, he's obviously not paying him directly. So Gorman is kind of doing his own thing, like the forged money from Slushy.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Oh, Mr. Barr, hope you won't mind. This is the dress for your little girl. Fair's fair, after all the tea and sugar you've given me. Why, that's sweet. So's his little girl. She's a duck. Lovely crepe. And the ruching. You wouldn't believe it. 42 6 a yard.
Let's see, how many dollars would that be?
Don't mess about. My arse is on fire.
Wouldn't be surprised. There's enough coppers outside.
Coppers? Did you say coppers?
Hundreds of them.
He loves his family, Bar. It's all for his kids. It's all for his wife.
Yeah.
He claims.
Yeah.
And I think it is true because at the end of the film, when it's looking bad for them and the noose is tightening, as it were, he tries to get money and messages to his family because he's about to go on the run, basically.
Yeah. And there's almost this kind of poignancy about this dress for his daughter that, he can't go and give to her. And it's interesting because one of the criticisms was that in the play, he really gets his comeuppance and his capture is pretty nasty. And whereas in the film, he's taken by the police, but he kind of gets off quite lightly. And one critic complained, he's being left as a hero for the adolescents to, which I'm not quite sure that,
I think he will go inside. He's not going to be hanged, I don't think.
Yeah, but he doesn't put up a fight, I guess. He sort of resigns himself to it. So it was presented in a very different way, apparently, in the film, which some people felt was letting him off too lightly. Obviously, Sujani's got his comeuppance, so... Apart from Linda Medbury, there's a bit of an issue with the female characters in that they're all completely expendable. Yeah. And they're really just, apart from maybe Mercia Lane, who's
she's odd.
There's a story behind her.
So just to explain, this is
she's
at the end of the film, this character appears and then becomes...
Well, no, she doesn't appear right at the end because she appears when they take Annie Foss back, she realises that Mercia has taken her place as Sujani's girlfriend. Yeah. She's a film star.
Yeah. And you see her signing up photographs and stuff. But then she does become the focus of the last 10 minutes almost. There's this, I don't want to be too spoilery, but she appears a lot, clothed and then less clothed.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you were going to say
So,
about her.
well, she's an American model. Her actual name is Carol Wenderman. Because I found a nice report in the press saying that she was in the south of France, deciding what she was going to do with her life, and she'd been quite a successful model. And then there was a story that said, Edmond T. Greville was in the Riviera, and he met this woman, and he said, come and be in my movie. So I think there's quite a lot of that probably went on with Edmond T. Greville. And she's not bad, actually, in it.
She's fine.
You know, she hasn't got an awful lot to do, as you say, look nice in cami knickers.
Well, we all look nice in cami knickers, you know.
Speak for yourself. But she appeared in one other film in her entire career, which is Greville's next film.
That same year, in 48.
Yeah. So she didn't go on to have a great career. But yeah, I mean, she's actually got a not too bad part in it, because she and Linda team up at the end to bash. And actually, there's a moment where she picks up Sujani's knuckle dusters, and you think, wow, you know, but we don't see that, which is a bit of a shame. But she's obviously quite a spirited woman, and I like that. But it's the characters like Maffy, who's the young girl who works at the at the boxing Bason's gym, at the boxing place, who comes to a nasty end. And then you've got the other young woman, so you've got Annie Foss, who's, again, she's a British actress, but she's very good as a French ex-girlfriend of Sujani. Yeah. But again, they're all very tragic kind of characters who come to a nasty end. And I find that aspect of the film a little bit unfortunate.
Going back to the tone and that kind of mix of tones, Maffy's death is very, very sinister.
Yeah.
There's a fantastic scene actually, when it's the duration of one song, the club's closed, the staff are hanging around, there's a woman playing piano, and Annie comes in, and then she has a quick conversation with a member of staff and gets led away by the barber. That is deeply sinister.
Yeah.
And then you have the sort of comedic side of Bar, and the sort of chirpy kind of Lois Laney type thing from Carol Landis.
Yeah.
I think that does sort of balance me, that. But it kind of loses it at the end.
And
the Benny Hill stuff.
Even Sujani is kind of a complex character, because although we know he's really evil, and they talk about the murder of Millie Sharp and how he's wanted her to be chucked in the river where it was really deep, where she wasn't going to get,
not in a puddle.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's almost a comic side to him as well at times. I mean, he's
more
fantastic
than just funny foreigner.
Yeah. It's a fantastic performance. And I think some of the roles are quite hard to play because of this kind of shifting of tone. But I found a quote from Greville while it was being filmed, actually. And he says, believe it or not, he's just been watching the rushes. I was a wee bit scared of the result. As a film fan myself, Noose has all the qualities I like in a film, drama, action, and so on. But we were anxious that it should not just be another sordid crime film. And we have tried to bring as much comedy into it as we can without robbing the story of its drama. Now, another salient point to this, that sort of very weird comedy ending, where you've got the, comedy fight scene happening, and the music's going wah, 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 it's very odd. But the screenplay was written primarily by Richard Llewellyn, but the producer, Edward Dryhurst, spent 2 weeks in Wales with him writing the script. Now, Edward Dryhurst is a really fascinating character. He was a producer, but he was mainly a writer. And actually, he wrote a song in the film, the song that's performed. He actually wrote. Song. I assume it's that one. But he started out his career, he went to Hollywood in the 1920s, and he worked with Mack Sennett. And he wrote gags for Harold Langdon. Right. So maybe that was, a part of his contribution to the script.
It's his comfort zone.
He was bringing, he wanted to bring a bit of silent slapstick into the movie.
There were some dreadful gags. There's one where Puddin' Basin, as he's called, falls asleep and he under a tap. And
it's like a fountain, isn't it? He falls back into a fountain, knocked semi-conscious, it seems. Yeah,
and the guy who's in the bathtub, rockabye, but he bonks him on the head every time.
It's a bit daft. And actually, the critics of the film said, well, they've taken all the nasty stuff out and substituted it with some very ill-matched slapstick. But I still like the film despite that. And I think
I like it a lot.
The other issue with that, there's Greville does some amazing visual flourishes. There's lots of mirror stuff.
Yeah.
There's one scene where Linda's sort of cleaning the mirror inside her little mini bar thing she's got. She then closes and there's glasses attached to it. So she closes it, the glasses are kind of, and then you cut to a scene where the gang are smashing up the forgery racket, and so they're smashing glass sounding. So it's a great transition.
In fact, before the transitions before that scene, she's in Annie's flat, and the scene closes on a shot of a kind of a luggage label.
Yeah, it's a trunk.
Yeah,
it's
on a trunk.
The label
and
on
then
the trunk.
that crossfades to the same similar thing on a filing cabinet.
Yeah.
In the office of the newspaper, and goes back to that, and then it goes to that was quite impressive.
It was really nice. So you see a hand closing this filing cabinet drawer with the same sort of shaped label, and then you can see Linda inside the office with her editor. And then someone opens, the person who's closed the door goes in, opens the door, you hear the conversation, then comes out, shuts the door, you don't hear the conversation, and then goes back to the filing cabinet. It's a beautifully sort of constructed little scene.
Really nice. There's another shot earlier on where she's saying, I don't want to do fashion anymore, I want to do crime. And she tears up this picture, like a fashion picture, and then the camera is like behind the torn up pieces of paper, a bit like looking through somebody's legs, actually.
Yeah.
At the editor who's there snuffling with his handkerchief because he's got a cold.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff is. It puts it slightly above the rest, slightly.
It almost becomes too much. I almost feel that he does too much of it in the film, and that it gets a little bit.
Here we go.
A little bit laboured.
Yeah.
But that's, on the whole, I like it a lot, and it's very satisfying, that the kind of his real sense of the visual and trying to do something interesting, which not many British filmmakers were doing at the time. So can I talk briefly about Robinson, about the sets and the...
Yes.
I think Greville's visual style in the film obviously is dependent to me on two people, which is Bernard Robinson, who's the set designer. So the sets are fascinating. I mean, to me, the scenes like the ones in the boxing gym, where you've got a conversation between Hoyle and Basin, and behind them there's another room and there's stuff going on. So it's like this multi-layered. He's not just
got
concentrating
pool one
on
side and the gym the other side.
But he's not just focusing on what's specifically in the frame. He's looking at behind. He's looking at different levels of up and down. There's a scene where the camera rises on a staircase to sort of change perspective. And obviously, he would have had to work very closely with Bernard Robinson about what he wanted from the sets. Bernard Robinson called himself the Marks and Spencers of art direction, so value for money. So he could do a lot with a little. And obviously, the set design brief was pretty heavy on this film because it's so much studio bound. And then, of course, you got the cameraman, Hone Glendinning, who had started at Quota Quickies in the 30s. He shot several Todd Slaughter movies. So he was pretty good at atmosphere and the darker side of things. But I think that the way that they worked together, and obviously Greville had his vision and they made that come to life, I think is really effective.
Thank you to Joe Botting for coming on the show to discuss Noose, fantastic as ever. Joe's Project in the Archive slot is inked into my diary every month, and I really recommend you check out the upcoming films and get yourself along there. And thanks again to Steve Hayes, who was paying his first visit to us, and I hope you'll come back. You'll find links to information about Joe, the BFI, Steve, Noose, Carol Landis, Spivs, you name it, in the show notes for this episode, where you can also subscribe to the show. That's all at sohobytespodcast.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that either by leaving a kind review at sohobytespodcast.com/review, or by dumping piles of cash on my head at sohobytespodcast.com/donate. We are grateful for the continued support of the Museum of Soho. Please check them out at mosoho.org.uk. You'll find them housed within the All Is Joy building at 75 Dean Street, just opposite that other great Soho institution, Quo Vadis. Soho Bites is produced by me, Dom DeLargy, and is based on an original idea by Dr. Jing and Young. I'll see you in a few weeks, and bye for now. Hello, this is what's known as a mid-roll ad. It's one of those annoying interruptions that's inserted retrospectively at just the wrong point. And the reason for it is that Soho Bites takes up hours of time every month, and I'm hoping you might be able to support the show. There are two ways you can do this. One is for free, and it's to leave the show a star rating or kind review. You can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/review. Or if you'd like to assist financially to help cover our costs, you can do that at sohobitespodcast.com/donate. Thank you very much. Apologies for the interruption, and back to the episode.